For the last couple of years, I've been painstakingly tracking the time that I spend working. This is a habit that completely changed my working life and is something that I strongly recommend to anyone who wants to improve their professional productivity. The end of the year is obviously the time to analyze this data, and now that I have a couple of years to compare, I thought that doing these analysis publicly, so to speak, would be quite interesting. So let's get started, and here are the types of work that I have dedicated time on in 2023. Entry number 12, which corresponds to the category that I've spent the least amount of time on this year, is study, research, and professional development. This is all the time that I spend learning new tools and techniques and in general invest in my professional development. You'll see that there was an incredibly high decrease compared to last year, and so this is for me not a good result at all, and I really hope that I will have more time to dedicate on my professional development in 2024, as this is something that I really consider very important. Entry number 11 is the book that I started writing. This is obviously a very exciting project for me. I'm sure I'll have a chance to tell you more about it in 2024. You'll see that there was already a tiny bit of amount of time dedicated to this in 2022. The reason for it is that the idea for the book came around the end of that year, and those 4 hours that I tracked in 2022 only represent a couple of notes that I wrote about the book, a couple of drafts, but nothing more. This year I've written some sample chapters of the book, an abstract, an outline, and I've pitched the idea to a few publishers. I've been discussing with a few of them, and there is at least one that is very interested in working with me to publish this book. I'm also contemplating self-publishing. I'm not quite sure what will happen, but what is sure is that I plan on spending a whole lot more time on it in 2024. The book is about musical sound design. I am very excited about it, and hopefully we'll see the light of day. Entry number 10 is meetings. I've spent 41.25 hours on meetings in 2023. As the average duration of a meeting is around 30 minutes, that means that I spent time on about 80 meetings this year, which is pretty crazy. For this category, I have no 2022 data to compare this result to, and the reason is that in 22 I was putting this into another category. I have a feeling that I've improved, meaning decreased the amount of time that I spend on meetings, but as I wasn't tracking it, this is just that, a feeling, and we have no idea if that's true. Entry number 9 is the time I spend doing marketing and creating content for my company, Sonora Cinematic. These days, this category mostly involves creating tutorials for our products, as I have an amazing collaborator who takes care of the rest of the marketing for me, and that's one of the best investments that I've done over the last few years. So as you can see, this was down a big chunk, and the year before was even bigger. Entry number 8 is my personal YouTube channel that you're hopefully watching right now. This is obviously pretty self-explanatory, includes scripting, shooting, and editing the videos on this channel. This particular result is probably the one that saddens me the most this year, because I really love creating content for this channel, and as you can tell, I haven't spent a lot of time doing it this year. Unfortunately, the issue with that is that the huge variety of topics that I cover on this channel makes it very algorithm unfriendly, which means that the return on investment for it is not great, even not considering the return on investment in a purely financial sense. I should probably just focus it on one topic and keep grinding videos on it, but at the same time I kind of like the idea that it's sort of a container for all sort of stuff. For number 7, we're gonna be very quick because it's time spent on a project that I can't mention due to NDA. All I'm going to say is that it's a project that started in 2022 and ended more or less halfway throughout this year, which explains the reason for the huge drop in hours I spent on it. At number 6, we have custom musical sound design, which is a new category for this year, as it was previously included included in another category. In this group of tasks, I include any musical sound design that I either do for other companies or for other composers or music teams that commission me custom presets or custom sound design assets. An example of this would be the sound design that I do for companies like Arturia. I've done a couple of projects with them with this year, which will be out very soon. It was great work with that team, but also, again, custom presets or sound design assets that other composers or music teams commission me. I can't really give any example of this type of work in terms of what I've done this year, because all the projects that I've worked on are unreleased and thus under NDA, but a past example of it would be the work that I've done on Me and Me, the Hero of Santopia, for example, or I've been a long-time collaborator of Massive Music, a big company out in Amsterdam, and I've done a few advertising campaigns with them doing exactly this. Every single task I've mentioned so far had a relatively small amount of hours I spent on. Each one accounted for less than 10% of the overall time that I spent working in 2023. Now we're entering top 5, and every single entry that I'm going to mention from now on, I spent at least 200 hours on it. At number 5, studio setup, tech prepping and fixing issues, with 234.5 hours spent on it, accounting for over 12% of the overall time that I spent working in 2023. So this includes anything from building a template for a job, to installing new software, to integrating a new piece of hardware into my workflow, to studio rewiring and things like that. Now, you might think that this number is extremely high, and you would be right. As you can tell, there is a huge increase compared to last year. But there are a couple of very good reasons for it. The first one is that in the middle of last year, I had contractors in the studio. We built an extra layer of insulation in the studio, and that required a whole move out of the studio with all my gear. It is a pretty packed and small studio, and a move back in, and a complete rewire of the studio, which took nearly 2 weeks. And the second one is that after 20 years on Mac, I moved to a PC system. I still have a Mac laptop that I use quite a lot, but my main machine is on PC. And this required a lot of moving files back and forth, a lot of rebuilding templates and reinstalling software, which bumped up the amount of hours that I spent on this particular task considerably. There is also a third but probably minor reason, which is that this year I've been doing a lot more sound design, and specifically I had to record a lot more Foley and sound effects in the studio, and I had to sort of build a tiny space for recording Foley in my very small studio, which required quite a lot of creativity. Overall, this is way too much. I'm not looking forward to doing anything like this again. I hope that this will be the state of the studio for a while, and I'm looking forward to reducing drastically the amount of hours spent on this task in 2024. At number 4 is admin and business development, with 268.75 hours spent on it, accounting for over 14% of the overall time that I spent working in 2024. This is an umbrella category for every admin related tasks, so filing invoices, sending invoices, doing my bookkeeping, but also preparing pitches, developing new ideas for products for Sonora Cinematic, R&D. You'll see that I've experienced quite a drastic reduction in the hours that I spent doing admin compared to 2022, but that's quite a misleading data, and the reason is that meetings, which is now a separate category which we already talked about, was previously embedded in admin and business development. That said, I think I have streamlined my approach to admin and my workflow related to admin tasks quite a bit, and I've also done a bit of outsourcing. So I think that the reduction is in a way true. In fact, if you add meetings plus admin for this year, compare it to the admin task from last year, that number is still lower. So I think that seems to be working quite a bit. One thing I would say though is that I am definitely not happy with admin and business development to be blended into one category. I think that the tracking in this way can be quite misleading, and so from 2024 I will definitely split this into two separate groups of tasks. And number 3, game audio and post sound design. This was 290.25 hours, accounting for over 15% of the overall time I spent working in 2023. This is all the time dedicated to what I call audio sound design, for lack of better term, to distinguish it from musical sound design, which we already talked about. So every hour spent designing sounds for games or for companies like Krotos, for example, that I work with as a freelance sound designer, goes in here. In terms of games, every hour that I spend on middleware like Fmod or WWise, if you're a game sound designer, you know what I'm talking about. I consider that very much sound design, so it still goes in here. Number 2 is writing and producing music. I spent 296.75 hours on it this year, accounting for over 15% of the overall time that I spent working in 2023. A small note on this category tracks specifically the amount of time that I spend writing music in my DAW or recording instruments or creating sounds that are specifically aimed at a piece of music. This means that no overhead whatsoever goes in this category, no music-related meetings, no template making, no session prepping. Each one of these tasks has its own category, and this helps me tremendously tracking the amount of quality time that goes into writing music. The fact that this category is now number 2, it was number 2 last year as well, gives me a lot of food for thought. I first got into the audio industry as a musician. I started by playing guitar, and then I got into music composition, and I hold a Master of Music in Scoring for Film, TV and Video Games from Berklee College of Music. So the fact that this category now represents less than 16% of my entire professional life is kind of weird. Don't get me wrong, I am obviously very aware of the fact that 16% is a lot, and I am extremely lucky to dedicate so much time to doing something that I love. On the one hand, I would obviously love to make more music. On the other, there is a lot of stress that comes with making a livable income for me and my family entirely by making music, and that's definitely a lot to bear, and it certainly impacted my creativity in the past. There is also a very important fact, which is that my love for sound design over the last few years increased tremendously. So I have sort of naturally spent less time making music as I dedicated more time to sound design, and I'm kind of okay with that, even though that does leave me with some mixed feelings. And one last consideration is that thanks to royalties, music keeps being a very, very important source of income for me. Probably the most important, actually. I haven't done the calculation just yet. I am going to, but I think it will be either the first or the second source of income for me. So this is something that I'm definitely going to consider in my resolutions for next year. I'm going to take this into big account when I think about what to focus my energies on in 2024. And finally, the number 1 category that I have spent the most time on working in 2023 is producing virtual instruments. I have spent 364.17 hours on it, accounting for over 19% of the overall time that I spent working in 2023. This is all the time that I dedicate to producing virtual instruments for my company Sonora Cinematic, plus a tiny bit of very occasional work that I take in this realm for other companies. Important note on this while analyzing the data is that this category previously included custom musical sound design. So while there looks like there is a decrease compared to this year, if you do the math, you'll notice that I've actually spent more time compared to last year in this category. Sonora Cinematic is growing and I'm very, very happy about it. We spend a lot of time and money in the production of a couple of instruments that I think are very, very cool and are coming out in 2024. And there are also a lot of very cool free products that are about to come out. So if you're interested, you can follow the link in the description below and sign up for our newsletter. Now that we finished this list, I thought that another cool data to analyze would be the overall time that I spend working, and I'd love to compare it to the amount that a non-freelancer, so a salaried full-time worker, spends working on average here in the UK, the country where I live. So this year I have worked 1,910.43 hours, which is slightly less than last year. This makes sense as I became a father for the second time, so I've taken some time off when my daughter was born earlier this year. So considering that there were 251 working days in the UK in 2023, this means that I have worked 7.6 hours per day on average. There are a couple of important caveats to take into account in this number. The first one is that I track rigorously the number of hours that I spend working, so I don't count for coffee breaks or lunch breaks or anything like that. And the second is that this number doesn't take into account holidays, which I do take just like any other worker does. Let's compare this data with the data of a salaried full-time position. So between 1992 and 2023, the average number of hours worked weekly by full-time workers in the UK was 36.4, which means an average of 7.28 hours per day compared to my 7.6. If I had to adjust the number of hours that I work per day for the holidays, 28 days that a worker normally gets here in the UK, this number would go to over 8.5 hours per day. So I guess the conclusion is pretty bad news that I definitely work more as a freelancer compared to the average salaried full-time position in the UK. Although I'm very sure it comes with more flexibility, which some people, including me, very much value. For me, it's very important to keep an eye on this number, on the number of hours I worked during the year, because before becoming a father, I used to work some insanely long hours, 50, 60, sometimes 70 hours a week was not unheard of. I have worked that much, and that very quickly led to a very severe burnout, which I am really trying to avoid in the future. And let me close this video with some thoughts on what to improve in 2024. So obviously for me, and I'm guessing pretty much for everybody else, the goal is to minimize the amount of time spent on overhead, on admin tasks, and to focus the most energies on creative, good quality work. So it's pretty clear that my three main areas of work are producing virtual instruments, writing and producing music, and doing sound design. These are all things that I enjoy very much, and I love to have the core of my energies focus on these three main tasks. That said, I would obviously love to put some of the hours back into writing and producing music, and I would specifically love it if this came to the detriment of admin tasks. And finally, as I already mentioned with the video, I would like to perfect even more the categorization of tasks to hopefully lead to better tracking for next year. Specifically, I love to add 3 different categories. The first category that I love to add is networking events. I have been to a few this year, and these went generally into admin and business development, and I don't think that's quite right. I think that they do deserve their own category, and I want to do a lot more of them in 2024. So definitely new category for them. Second is, as already mentioned, I want to split admin and business development into 2 separate categories. And finally, I want to add a live performance category. I have a couple of gigs booked in 2024. This is something that I don't do a lot of at all, but it's something that I very much enjoy. And I'd love to book some more gigs. I perform live electronic music and I'd love to do more of it. So I'm going to add a new category, hoping that is a good omen for more booked gigs in 2024. I really hope this very long video, thank you so much for watching it this far, was useful to you, whatever you do. I personally really believe that tracking the time that you spend is a great tool for improving your productivity and to make sure that you spend the most time doing the things that you love. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed this, and thank you so much for watching, and most importantly, have a wonderful 2024. See you next year.